Okay, greetings and salutations. I have created this opening message specifically to share the contents of the meeting that I held with Ralf from the Shelly Drive Neighborhood Watch on the 31st of January, which I think is beneficial to everybody that is going to watch the video firstly, but specifically to those involved with that particular neighborhood watch. Now, at the end of the meeting, I actually do insert a very specific appeal, which I think somewhere around 22 minutes into the video of the meeting, you may view it. However, in order to understand why the appeal has been made, I'd like you to preferably watch the entire video itself, as it gives a pretty good explanation and background into a disaster relief CERT. My name is Chad Milam. I am a founding member. I'm a director and board chairman of Disaster Relief CERT. Very simple background CV of me. I was trained by the International Committee of the Red Cross going back 30 years ago when I was operations manager for Southern Transvaal region, and as a result of it, to be able to impart my knowledge with the community, we decided, myself along with John Groom, a fellow Red Cross a volunteer and staff member, and Stephen Reynolds, a licensed radio amateur. By the way, all of our directors are licensed amateurs. We decided to form Disaster Relief CERT, and it is on this basis. Regardless of the organization you are with or the organizations you might choose to join, my recommendation is register as a Disaster Relief CERT volunteer, get to know other skills, learn other skills, and contribute to your own local community. Then, in addition to that, I need you to understand that usually what happens when people volunteer their time, the effort, their money. It is normally us guys that stand up and say, we're going to do this. And in our day, it was a case of we joined the reservists and we went out and we did whatever, but we left the wives at home, we left the kids at home. And at the end of the day, that created a lot of friction at home. Well, the good news for those of you, and today, I mean, a lot of women go out and, they become paramedics and the guys are left at home. And I think we just got a reverse in the frustration level, but the frustration levels are still there. Well, the good news is that Disaster Relief CERT volunteers can be anybody over the age of 16. And there's a place for each and every single one of you. Doesn't make a difference where you come from, what you do, who you married to, how you married. That's irrelevant. If you have got a desire to help, from the age of 16 years of age and up, you can register legally as a volunteer, and you can provide assistance in many, many areas. We have got many areas whereby you can, in actual fact, provide assistance. It is listed on the website, disasterreliefcert.org.za. And to give you a couple of categories where you would be able to provide any form of assistance. I'm going to blow this up and make it a bit bigger so that it does in actual fact stand out a fair bit more. We are looking at areas such as level 3 first aid, but if you don't like the sight of blood, well, maybe you don't mind bringing the marshmallows and the boerewors. You can, always get involved in basic firefighting. Both of these courses are courses that will be run through the MCOM Training Academy. And then there's also communications, where we are looking at various aspects of communications. And this is outside of the reliance on cell phone networks. I must point that out. Personally, I don't believe that cell phone networks are applicable anymore, as we recently saw now in January 2023, where in actual fact, one of the fiber networks went down. And very few people are aware of the fact that a second major fiber network has just experienced some vandalism on a fiber network a cable of theirs. I think it's about 288 pairs of fiber cable that were damaged. And of course, that's going to take them a fair bit of time, and it's going to cost a fair bit to go back and splice that. So communications, We are specifically looking at two-way radio two-way radio communications for emergency purposes. But we are also in the process of setting up a wide area IP data network, of which we will be launching that now from February of 2023. And of course, we're going to need volunteers, especially people with an IP network background that can come together as a CERT registered volunteer, learn how to set up these additional networks that we can utilize out in the field. Then we've also got other areas like disaster area damage assessment or disaster area assessment, response and reporting teams. There's logistical support if you've got a bakkie or a combi or an SUV. You never know, young lady, you're sitting at home there, your father's gone out and he's going to go and do the basic firefighting and fight fires, and you're going to sit there and you can say, no, wait a minute. These guys need water, and that you can get in the vehicle, go fetch water from a donor, bring it down like we saw a lot of the volunteers did with the Bank of Lisbon fire. You can do that as a CERT volunteer as well. Logistical support, definitely you can go out there and, move equipment backwards and forwards, but you could also, in actual fact, assist with evacuations and provide transport. Taking people, walking wounded even, P3 patients could, in actual fact, you could load them up into a couple of SUVs and drive them off to a hospital. We don't need an ambulance for P3. So there's a lot of areas. And when I say P3, I know a lot of people are going to say, but wait a minute, I'm going to end up with blood in my vehicle and all the rest of it. Well, you don't need to take those patients. There are a lot of patients that don't have trauma injuries. It could be psychological, could be other medical injuries as a P3 that can be transported. So that is something that will depend on the overall management of the disaster scene. And that's what we are talking about. We are talking about disaster management, not day-to-day emergencies, not day-to-day falling down the stairs, motor vehicle accidents, whatever the case might be. That is dealt with outside of the scope of disaster relief CERT. Then there's also the animal rescue. I know a lot of people will shoot me down for this, but every time I think of animal rescue, I think of the young ladies out there and even the old ladies out there. You could be, well, 65, you're probably not that old, because if I say you are, I'm putting myself in the same category. I don't consider myself to be old. But the elderly, the more senior persons might have a love to take care of children. So every time I come up with animal rescue, I think about the children as well. And I'm just trying to find the correlation between that animalistic instinct between both. So please excuse my humor and my pun. Then, of course, there's also that general support such as care and comfort. That is something, as Red Cross during the time that the Helderberg SAA aircraft went down outside Mauritius, we in actual fact deployed various of our ladies in pink in particular and a couple of our Red Cross volunteers to Jan Smuts Airport to go and provide assistance, even if it just meant giving people a cup of coffee. So there's a lot of areas. And then, of course, you can get involved in emergency kitchens and feeding schemes. And all of this takes manpower. Fani, morning. How are you, man? I asked you to join because Ralf did tell me that he is also a member of AfriForum. And I mean, you are a CERT volunteer. I want him to come up as a CERT volunteer and, look at building teams up down his side of town, etc., etc. And of course, as I've said to you before, we're not here to take over what AfriForum might do. We're not here to get involved with neighborhood watchers because they do what they do, securities, etc. But when we do have a disaster, we need to collaborate and wear multiple hats. Fani, just quickly, what is your official title with AfriForum there? I never get it right.
Yeah, I'm the chairperson of the branch for the whole of Roodepoort. Sorry, Chad. I just want to say that from our perspective, right, we encourage our members to join wherever they can. we've got members from all over the show. We're also in the process of there's a young lady, Taryn Cook. She's some sort of an expert on, or well trained for disaster management. She's doing all of our documents on that. We haven't got a disaster management as yet, and during this year it will become. But we still, irrespective, we still encourage our members to join wherever they can. It doesn't matter if it's CPF, ER24, you name it. Because we feel the more people we have on board, the better it will be. So we're also in the process this week, as a matter of fact, we will receive our first batch of VHF radios. We've already put up the repeater and so on. Now, as far as communication is concerned, in the Roodepoort area, we will issue the VHF radios. We will also have 5 people that's on the national system, and we'll have, I think, if I'm correct, 3 more that's radio amateurs. Now, the whole idea of that is that we can, in the area, and then let's say Alberton or wherever, we can also communicate with them and ask them to assist, and then also obviously national. Now, that does not influence at all what CERT is doing. We will preferably have more than one type of communication. If the one fails, we've got something else to fall back on. So yeah, we do encourage. If you're one of our Neighborhood Watch members, or even an ordinary member, we do encourage, and we ask all of our people to please join wherever you can. If somebody else is willing to take you, please join them. And that's just my 2 cents.
Okay, good stuff. Thanks, Fani. Disaster Relief CERT ultimately will only get involved during times of disaster. Now, I don't know if you went and had a look at the website as yet, but
not as yet.
I've actually put a lot of information up here, including the background, and it is modeled after the United States concept of CERT, or Community Emergency Response Teams. And then, of course, under the company documents is our Memorandum of Incorporation. And our clear mandate is to prepare volunteers to provide disaster relief and assistance. So I need to reach out to several categories of people in order to fulfill this mandate. And those categories of people are CPFs, security companies, other community-based organizations, the general public, just generally, whether they're part of a CPF, Neighborhood Watch, or otherwise, all of it is irrelevant. So in order for CERT to carry out its mandate, I need to reach out to all of you guys completely. Yep. And as I said, what you do on a day-to-day basis is not our concern. We're not involved in it. You do what you have to do. Our concern is what happens when a disaster strikes.
Yep.
As CERT, we then need to be able to carry out certain functions and feed that information up through to disaster management. And to be quite honest, it'll be easier for disaster management to actually be in a position where they've got like the municipal fire, EMS, etc., sitting there at the disaster management center, and CERT puts in a volunteer, and all radio communications from the field goes straight through to the DMC. Okay. Now, where do we get our information from? From our volunteer structure. The whole concept of Disaster Relief CERT is to build community-based teams. Nothing else. Right, so my idea is that within like the Ward 89 grouping, okay, or
Mhm.
demarcation or demarcated ward. My concept is to have a minimum of 10 volunteers.
Okay.
Now, because of the fact, and like they've done with the Residents Association, because of the fact that we've got this ridge, so Constantia Kloof, also from a radio communication perspective, would have to be separated into 2 areas. So when I have a look at that particular area, ultimately 10 volunteers might be too few. My idea is that 2 of the volunteers from a CERT perspective are trained specifically to do radio communications, preferably radio amateurs, but base stations. And the idea, of course, is that within that area, the other 8 people that are going to go out and, be able to carry out whatever tasks, duties, whatever, whether it be the disaster area damage assessment or whether it be a surveying of an area, going out to assist the injured, the wounded, whatever the case might be. Each and every single one of them has to be in radio contact with a particular base station. Now, I mean, if you look at it, and I know a lot of people get very annoyed with me. Let's say, for example, a tornado came through Ward 89 and it took out the whole of Constantia Kloof, top and, north and south. So we all got killed. Then those volunteers in that area are not my concern. But when you look at the volunteers in 85 and 126 and 86 and 88, and then also the 70 as well, they can actually step in and assist. Within one area of having 10 volunteers, we should have maybe 40 or 50 surrounding them. The volunteers, I want to break them down that 2 of them are base stations, that they've got radio communications with the other 8 members, or there's no hard and fast rule that a area can only have 10 volunteers. We can have 100 volunteers in an area. I don't mind.
Yeah.
It makes life easier. The point is that the 100 volunteers, 98 of them can go out and do whatever, provide assistance, bring relief, apply first aid, help with a light search and rescue, assist with evacuation, but most importantly, to provide valid, current, and up-to-date information on the situation within an area that it can be fed through to the Disaster Management Center. So to keep the costing down, every volunteer can have a CERT handheld. The base stations to be able to operate from a base, meaning that they will have to have battery backups and, external antennas. And of course, that will give them a far greater range as well. Now, coming down to our shared screen here, I was just using Ward 89 as an example. So if you've got a base station in 85 and you've got another base station in 126, those 2 base stations should still be able to communicate with the majority of volunteers in Ward 89. So that they complete a networking facility using Simplex to keep the pricing down. And this is the concept that I want to push forward moving forward. So, Ralf, ultimately, at the end of the day, the idea is, as I say, to have volunteers in all the areas.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that I'm structuring it is that before the disaster strikes, all of the volunteers are trained in certain categories, from basic radio communications, definitely on a CERT induction perspective, so that they fully understand what CERT is about and where CERT is going to play a role, and that CERT is not going to interfere with neighborhood watches or even certain aspects of what AfriForum does or whatever. And that is the basic concept of what we are doing from our side. So in order to meet our overall objective, we need to establish community emergency response teams. Yeah, even though it might be a duplication, let me put it to you this way. Back in our day when I was with Red Cross, Joburg ambulance reservists, many of them were Red Cross volunteers as well.
Mm-hmm.
So if they weren't called up as a reservist, they could still get involved as a Red Cross volunteer in a particular incident or operation that was ongoing. Joburg traffic reservists also were members of the Red Cross. Fire reservists were members of the Red Cross. So the cross-pollination becomes important, because where you've got your mandate as a neighborhood watch, your mandate might not, in actual fact, from a legal perspective on a long-term situation, be applicable to what you do outside of your normal day-to-day activities. That is something we've always got to consider when it comes down to, like, the Disaster Management Act. From my perspective, I would like your members to consider also registering as Disaster Relief CERT volunteers, and to look at things outside of just the ordinary neighborhood watch aspect, which in order for you to operate on a day-to-day basis, the life skills that you learn through CERT can still be applied on your day-to-day basis. It also has a benefit to the local community. For me, the most important thing is to save lives. That's it. End of the story. How we do it is irrelevant. Through who we do it is irrelevant. But let's cross-pollinate. Where you concentrate with your neighborhood watch activities, or in other cases, CPF activities, whatever the case might be, security related, through Disaster Relief CERT, where you'll only get involved when we have a massive incident, like we had with the flooding, for example.
Correct.
But in addition to that, once you fully understand the concept of community emergency response teams from our perspective, working within your own social media groups like I'm doing at the moment, we start creating disaster awareness, which is point 3 of our memorandum of incorporation. And we start sensitizing not our existing volunteers, but our local community on the potential of a disaster. To give you an example, on the Constantia Kloof group a year ago, when I said these are the possibilities that could happen, a lot of people came to me privately and told me I'm stupid, I'm mad, I'm nuts, I'm crazy, and all the rest of it. Well, lo and behold, I know that. They didn't have to tell me that. I've known that since 13, actually 11. Because at the age of 11, I realized I don't like the sight of blood. And the best way to not have to deal with the sight of blood was to learn how to stop it. And that's why I became a paramedic. So I know that I was crazy. But here we are today. And we are having situations that I was trained to carry out, to undertake, to supply, to provide, to give assistance 30 years ago by the International Committee of the Red Cross. That's where my training and my background comes from. So again, through collaboration with the Neighborhood Watch, the creating of the disaster awareness within a local community definitely plays a role. You guys will learn certain life skills that can be applied. Including, well, we are currently embarking on a complete new training program, both DTI, CETA, SACWA approved, and just ordinary legal compliance and life skills training in various other areas, which is point 2 of our mandate, which we use as a tool to prepare our communities. When you register as a Disaster Relief CERT volunteer, you are going to learn certain life skills in order to meet, as you can see on screen, the CERT objective of preparing volunteers to provide disaster relief and assistance. And the way that you are going to do that is to undergo certain training with us. Cost implication I will discuss in a minute. However, the skills that you learn from a disaster relief perspective is ultimately going to be a benefit to you, not only in your own household or your workplace, but also in terms of your local community. And especially if you get involved in other organizational activities, other NGO activities, neighborhood watches, CPFs, even as volunteering with other groups, EMS groups, or whatever the case might be. That choice is yours. You're going to take the skills learned on the one side and transfer them to other organizations. What you learn on other organizations, you can bring over and, of course, cross-pollinate with CERT as well. Take a look at your neighborhood watch, for example, on a day-to-day basis. You've got your own tasks. It's got nothing to do with me. I don't get involved in any of that whatsoever. That is your day-to-day activities. Okay, so in closing, this is the edited version of the meeting that I had. There were various technical issues that we needed to overcome during the course of the meeting, and that prompted me to, in actual fact, edit the video itself. So in closing, I'd just like to mention the fact that when it comes to radio communications, there was one point one issue that I did raise that I'm going to share with you, and then immediately after that, we'll move into that specific appeal. Okay, good stuff. So as far as the radio communications comments and questions were concerned, in terms of looking at the ward-based structures and having people communicate as CERT registered volunteers, we also from the MCOM Pty Limited perspective, which is my sideline company for radio communications specifically, what I'm looking at doing there is creating and forming community emergency radio networks. Now, this is specifically for members of the public in general to come together and set up radio networks which will be licensed through MCOM. And the purpose of those licenses will be issued to those residents, whether they are, residents just within a local area, or if they are in complexes or housing estates, whatever the case might be. But this will enable them to be able to communicate with each other. But in addition to being able to communicate with each other, they will also be able to communicate with people outside of an affected area and outside of their local sort of suburb or ward or whatever the case may be. And based on this concept, then at least they would also be able to communicate with registered CERT volunteers, so that the registered CERT volunteers can escalate whatever the problem, especially medically related problems. During times of load shedding, during times of cellular network failures, which are becoming more and more, the cell network providers have stipulated already. There is news releases to the effect that they are battling to keep, well, Eskom's battling to keep the lights on. The cell networks are battling to keep communications going, purely because of the fact that by no fault of their own, their batteries keep on getting stolen for their battery backup solutions. Recently, the fiber networks failed, so that backhaul also fell over, and that wasn't fail over, that was fell over, as in no longer working. And then, of course, the batteries don't get sufficient time between load shedding events to charge and be fully charged for the next cycle. So on that basis, it has also now become important, just as important, if not more important, to be quite honest with you, to ensure that, one, you've got fuel for heat and cooking, that you've got food stockpile, that you've definitely got water. Electricity we can do without ultimately, but we still need to be able to cook food, etc., etc. Tin food, cold is not always very nice, and of course during winters we need fuel for warmth. Radio communications is critical now. We cannot rely on cellular networks. We should not, to be more accurate, and I don't put the cellular networks down in any way whatsoever. It's just a fact. I mean, if you really and truly think about it, cell towers are being vandalized, the same as our electrical infrastructure. So therefore, a lot of emphasis needs to be put on two-way radio communications, whereby two-way radios, whether those are handhelds or mobile units in a mobile, or mobile units in a base station, You can charge those radios using your 12-volt cigarette lighter socket for as long as you've got fuel in your car, but you can also charge it off the solar systems and other battery systems. So this is the one area of concern that I personally foresee coming down the pipeline, and that's not because there's electrical supply to push it down the pipeline. This is just coming down the pipeline as a matter of fact. Communications by means of two-way radio is critical. And for those of you that are out there relying on PTT, you must remember that push-to-talk or PTT actually works only via the cell phone network. And if that network goes down, you've got no radio communication, or no communications at least, not radio communications. Yes, cell networks are RF, but in a much different aspect to what one would generally call two-way radio. So you've got radio versus PTT. PTT could be a contract that you've got with a PTT supplier. It could be Zello. Even using WhatsApp, that's via the fiber or over your cell network. All of that can fail. There's no way that you can communicate. So as part of the overall structure, two-way radio communications has become just as critical as food and water. That being said, let's move on to my actual appeal, which follows, and this was the appeal that was pre-recorded during the meeting with Ralf. My appeal to you is support your local communities and register as a Disaster Relief CERT volunteer. Help and assistance will not only be valued, but it will be beneficial to your local community. Now, I did say there's a cost implication. Whichever way we look at it, we have to have radio communication capabilities between all volunteers on a secure network because of the fact that we'll be sharing personal and confidential information. We also need to understand that at this moment in time, criminality has increased exponentially throughout the country, and we need to safeguard not only you as a volunteer, but also safeguard the victims of a disaster or those that are affected. Oh, that's nice. We got a monkey down the road from me at the moment. Corner Liebenberg and Christian de Wet Road, there's a monkey.
Oh, don't worry, we've had a few monkeys running around.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah.
So, okay, going back, I'll leave that in. As you can see, this is how we deal with things on a daily basis. So the cost implication, radio communications is vital in order to protect you, the volunteer, and also to protect the victims of a disaster. Every single volunteer will be required to have a CERT a vest, which is in the region of, I think, of 200 Rand, specifically branded for CERT, and a two-way radio, the handheld. We are looking at, depending on the Rand-dollar exchange rate, when we purchase it, can be anything between 2,400 and 3,200. Unfortunately, we cannot get away from that. And of course, the two-way radio equipment is supplied by MCOM PDY Limited. I'll give both Disaster Relief CERT and MCOM's URL at the end. Those are once-off costs. Then, as far as training is concerned, we've actually got 3 manuals that have already been published. The first one, of course, is the introduction to Disaster Relief CERT, so that you as a volunteer will know exactly who we are, what we stand for, what we are permitted to do, what we are not permitted to do, and under which of the legal legislation or under which legislation we in actual fact do operate as a registered non-government organization. We are registered as a non-profit company and a SARS approved public benefit organization. The second one, of course, is the basic radio communications. Guys, this is not CB radio. This is not amateur radio. Fani, Stephanus on screen, also a licensed amateur. He knows that we're dealing with totally different communication protocols. And then finally, the third manual for now is the Disaster Area Damage Assessment Manual. Now, all three of these books in total, again, is going to be a once-off cost. Currently, this is based on the existing printing costs of 650 Rand. Then as far as the training is concerned, we need to, and from an MCOM perspective, MCOM PDY Limited, I'm a director of that company as well. We have a written memorandum of cooperation with Disaster Relief CERT. MCOM is the service provider for all the training and radio equipment. We've done this to, in actual fact, be able to keep the CERT financial books clean, where we do not have any possibility of unknowns. And this will tie up with the PBO registration, which I'll discuss in a minute. So that being said, MCOM Training Academy will be providing this training. The training initially will be done via Zoom, and much of the practical work can also be undertaken via Zoom. Those that are in the local area of myself here in the region of the Roodepoort or Florida Fire Station will be able to attend some practical sessions and training. In some areas, we can do it here. Those of you that are outside of this area, you'd have to make a plan one way or another. We'll see how we're going to deal with that training. So when we look at the training aspect, of course, there's going to be, for example, Zoom costs that have to be covered. We've got internet costs that have to be covered. And in addition to that, I need to ensure that there is an infrastructure that can, in actual fact, be utilized for CERT purposes. So what I want to do is I just want to give you a very brief outline of what this office looks like. And that'll give you an indication of possibly what some of the equipment is that is available for CERT purposes. However, all of this does have a cost implication. For example, on my right-hand side here, we've got an entire radio communications rack that manages the CERT frequencies. And of course, now those are ICASA licensed radio frequencies. And I want to tell you that as I sit at this moment in time, my apologies, I turned off there. As I sit at this moment in time, our radio licenses are probably in the region of about 20,000 Rand a year. So there is a cost implication that needs to be recovered. The more volunteers that we bring on, of course, the licensing costs are going to go up. Fiber speeds and that I'm not too worried about, because that is something 200, 500 meg we can cope with. A lot of people on Zoom. So what I will do is, from the MCOM perspective, we are currently looking at, I'm just waiting for the board of directors to give the go-ahead. We are going to be looking at implementing a 600 Rand a year or 50 Rand a month fee payable to all training. And that means that every registered CERT volunteer will be able to attend training sessions of the induction, the basic radio, disaster area damage assessment on an annual basis. That'll be 600 Rand a year or 50 Rand a month. End of the story, and included will be the simplex license for the radio. That will be included. So from a cost perspective, 600 Rand or 50 Rand a month to cover the training costs on an ongoing basis. 250 for the vest, and 650 for the books. I'm just following up. Maybe the monkeys at my gate. I need to make sure that things are happy here. So that there is just a general idea of the costing. It's not that high. However, you as a volunteer can approach your employer and ask your employer to make a donation to, or even of your own accord, you can make a donation directly to Disaster Relief CERT. And then whatever you donate in a financial year as a public benefit organization, you can ask us to issue what's called a Section 18A receipt. So if you donate, let's say 5,000 Rand in a financial year, you can donate up to 10% of your taxable income, either as a business or as an individual. You can ask us to give you a Section 18A receipt, and you claim that back as a taxable expense from your annual tax return. So you can claim back, it will lower your tax capabilities, and then that money that's paid into the CERT account, of course, a CERT will be invoiced by income at lower rates than the general public are charged. In other words, because MCOM is a profit company, and like any other business, there has to be a profit made on it. But the agreement that we've got with Disaster Relief CERT is that we will provide a discount to the registered volunteers. That is part and parcel of the agreement between CERT and MCOM. So this is an advantage of having CERT volunteers or people registered as a CERT volunteer. You will benefit from some of the hardware and licensing costs at a discounted rate. We do also, from MCOM's perspective, offer repeater solutions, which of course now that's outside of our purview. We have to rely on the suppliers, the high sites, and that costs anything between 200 and 300 Rand a month, depending on which way you want to go. So from that aspect, we can have a look at, how MCOM actually steps in. And I think that there, again, I'm just going to end this video off, which will be available for sharing. You guys are once you got the link, you're more than welcome to share it with as many people as you want. I will make it available. Probably I might put this one up on YouTube, because then at least that way it'll be available even during our load shedding. And I see the reporters that the monkey has been caught. Oh no, the tiger has been caught. There we go. So we got a monkey loose, but the tiger running around Edenville at the moment has been caught, which is good news. Okay, so I'm going to end the video off on that note and just finally again say, look guys, consider registering with CERT or Disaster Relief CERT, and the URL is www.disasterreliefcert, that's one word, and it's CERT.org.za, and the two-way radio network solution is www.mcom.coza. So that being said, I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you for taking time out and actually having a look at the video.